Gold text on a black background reads ADA30, presented by the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability and the Disability Visibility Project in association with the San Francisco Public Library. White text on a black screen reads Disability Visibility Project, creating, sharing, and amplifying disability media and culture at Dis Visibility. The Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability logo. The San Francisco Public Library logo.
Good afternoon, evening for some. And just to share, welcome to the ADA30InColor event presented by the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability, the San Francisco Public Library, and the Disability Visibility Project for hashtag ADA30. We see that there are multiple accounts that you can follow to participate in today's discussion at Longmore Institute, at SF Public Library, and at Dis Visibility. For more information, you can check out longmoreinstitute.sfsu.edu and disabilityvisibilityproject.com. So in order to participate in today's event, we have a few Zoom and access tips to support. For captioning, you can use the toggle on the CC button at the bottom of the window. Zoom captioning can be a bit flawed, so if you'd like easier viewing, you can visit this streamtext.net and we can put that in the chat. Please also note that this event is being filmed. And if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the Q&A box or email BEITIKS@sfsu.edu, and we will have time for audience questions. There are a host of folks that you can follow that are participating in today's conversations: Longmore Institute, Disability Visibility Project, Andrea Levant, that's me, Jen Deerenwater, Prometheus TJ Gordon, Rayma McCoy McDade, Valerie Novak, Leah Seth, and Alice Wong. Welcome, welcome, welcome to today's ADA30InColor event. It's a culmination of an amazing week of activities around ADA30, and there's more to come. We are really excited to hear from some essayists who participated in this ADA30InColor essays, submitted their essays and were shared throughout the week, really discussing the past, the present, and the future when it comes to their specific experiences as Black, Indigenous people of color. So with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, to share a bit about themselves, provide image descriptions, and you know what, let me provide an image description of myself as well. So I am sitting in front of an ADA30 background with balloons. I am wearing a fascinator that says 30 on it and has multicolors. I have some cat eye glasses, red lipstick. I am wearing some colorful earrings, some Mardi Gras beads around my neck. I have a 30 ribbon on that says it's the big one. And my shirt reads, "Wheelchairs are freedom." It's a navy blue shirt and the lettering is multicolored. So with that, I will bring on our other other folks that are going to be participating in today's conversation. Let's start with Jen Deerenwater. If you can provide description of yourself and a brief synopsis of what you wrote in your essay.
Sure. So I'm Jen Deerenwater. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm bi, two-spirit, multiply disabled, and chronically ill with pretty bad chronic pain and mobility impairments as a result of the pain. I grew up in rural Oklahoma and Texas. I now live on occupied Piscataway land known as Washington, D.C. I'm the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism, and I'm a freelance journalist. So I give you my image description. I've got brown hair and it's pulled back. I'm wearing black cat eye glasses with dangly earrings that have rainbow colored tassels on them. I have on bright purple lipstick and a lavender colored V-neck t-shirt. So my piece was just looking at what the ADA has and has not done for Native people. And for me, in my opinion, I feel like the ADA has done very little for disabled and ill Native people. And so I really kind of outlined that out in the piece where there are holes in protections that we need and how to get some of those protections. Sorry, I feel like I didn't give a very good synopsis of my piece. I hope that what I said made sense.
Of course, and we will get to learn even more throughout our conversation. So thank you so much, Jen. And I'd like now to bring in Tamithias TJ Gordon, if you can share a bit about yourself and provide an image description and provide a brief synopsis of what you shared in your essay.
Yes, I can. Hi, everyone. My name is Timotheus Gordon, Timottheus, or you can also call me TJ for short. I am an autistic self-advocate, writer, and researcher in Chicago. And I also have lived experiences with mental health and auditory processing disorder as well. As far as my image description, I'm currently sitting in a beige chair on a white wall in my apartment. I am wearing glasses, locks, black polo, and I'm also smiling while wearing headphones. And bottom my pronouns is he, his. My essay, which is Black Autistic Joy, is basically a kind of like a journey describing how the ADA shaped my Black and autistic identity from childhood to now. And I also talk about the challenges that myself and other people in my position are facing or may be facing.
Thank you, TJ. I'll call you TJ if that's cool. Awesome. And now I'd love for Rayma McCoy McDade to share a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Andrea. Hey, everybody. My name is Rima McCoy McDade, and my pronouns are she and her. And I'll do my image description before I dive into other things. So I am a light-complected Black American woman, 40 years old. I'm wearing kind of weird UFO looking glasses, and my hair is very large, curly, and brown. And I'm also, you can't see, I'm scrolling down, I've got on my Ola Ojewumi t-shirt that says Black Disabled Women Matter. You can find her by going to, I believe, hashtag Ola's Truth. I am the executive director of Central Iowa Center for Independent Living in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm also the treasurer and the Anti-Racism and Equity Task Force co-chair for the National Council on Independent Living, NICL. Additionally, I'm the chair of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. My piece for this particular project is called Missing Step, and it is about my personal experience with regards to being a racially marginalized, developmentally disabled woman in a movement that I feel is not built for somebody like me. And my piece goes into a lot of the challenges that I have personally experienced with regards to the ramifications that I've encountered as a result of trying to make space for myself in the disability community. And so I look forward to speaking about that more today, particularly with regards to what I think needs to happen to ensure that the next 30 years of the ADA are more intersectional than the first 30 years were. Delighted to be here today, and delighted that you are here as well.
Thank you, Rima, and those glasses are everything. From one glasses wearer to another. And now I would love to bring in Valerie Novak.
Hello all, my name is Valerie Novak. I'm getting my video turned on, sorry about that. I am a Black and Latina disability policy researcher. I have like chin length, curly, dark brown hair, and black framed glasses, and I'm wearing, I don't know what color this is, pinkish, purple-ish shirt, and just kind of white walls in the background. Recently moved, so working on that. I am very, very excited to be here, so thank you all for joining all of us, I guess. My piece was a little bit less looking back on the last 30 years of the ADA and more talking about some of the work that we have to do as a community, very similar to some of the stuff that Rima has talked about, I think, both in essay and just in different things I've seen Rima speak at, about the focus on disability rights and the way that we often don't account for all the different ways that people, particularly people of color, experience and have trouble with the rights system in the United States, and the way that we then continue to perpetuate some of those harms and erasures when we kind of hold on to that as a movement, and a little bit hopefully looking forward on how we can make changes within our community to make sure that as we continue to advocate for change, as we continue to advocate for rights and for visibility, that we're doing that in a way that truly does bring liberation and access to everybody, and not just certain populations, even within the disability community.
Thank you, Valerie. And Leah, Seth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Sate. I'll start with my image description. I am a woman of Asian Indian descent in my early 30s. I have dark hair to about my collar. I'm currently wearing a white top with a dark green cardigan. I have a wall of art and a plant behind me. I currently live in the California Bay Area. I have several disabilities, mostly physical and invisible. Some are hormonal, some are genetic, some have been diagnosed, some I'm still seeking that. In my regular life, I am a human resources specialist and an employment law junkie. In my essay for this project, which is called We Change, We Wait, I wrote about how I realized that I am disabled at a party celebrating the 20th anniversary of the ADA, which was held at the EEOC headquarters in Washington, D.C. In my essay, I reflected on how much I've changed in these past 10 years compared with how little the law and the ADA itself has changed.
Thank you, Leah. Leah Faith, I got it now. Thank you for clarifying. And last for a description, and certainly not least, is the fantabulous Alice Wong. Yay! Welcome on, Alice.
Hey, party people. My name is Alice Wong. I'm the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project, which is an online community dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying the disability media culture. I'm also the publisher and editor of this ADA30 essay series. I want to thank you all for being here. I know this has been some week and some day chock full of events. I am sitting in a black background because this is my bat cave. I'm wearing a black jacket with lots of white stripes, a very bright red lipstick, and a mask over my nose attached to a tube that is connected to a ventilator. So thanks a lot for all being here.
All right. Yay, we're so excited, Alice, for this conversation. And I just actually would love to start out with a question for you. And really just, we'd love to hear the background around why, I know I've had the privilege of, of working with you on this project for, oh my goodness, now it's been what, almost 8 months, I think. And it's been a privilege. And so would love to hear why you created this ADA30InColor series.
Well, I think it starts from almost the beginning of the Disability to Visibility Project, because in 2014, as you know, in the lead up to the 25th anniversary of the ADA, you know, there were lots of people trying to figure out what they were going to do. A lot of organizations gearing up, and at that time I was just an individual wondering, you know, what could be my contribution. I wasn't really affiliated with any group, so I started the DVP as a way to create disability history, because clearly there's not enough of it, and it's what exists is really really too damn white, in my opinion. So you know, that was the start of, I think, creating what I wanted to see in the world, and I think what we need in the world. And fast forward to last year, and I was thinking, oh, again, another, you know, landmark major anniversary. And I was thinking, what could I do different? And for me, I think we just need to hear from people, you know, hear directly from everyday disabled people of color telling their truths. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see at 8830, whether or not, you know, they're going to get huge, you know, coverage, or they're going to be like, you know, I guess, spotlighted in all the ways that they should be. So this is just another way to really recenter, I think, the work and the wisdom of disabled people of color, especially Black and Indigenous, and other people of color as well. So, you know, I thought, okay, I could do this. I could I don't have a huge infrastructure, but I know that I can publish essays, even though I will need help. And I'm one of those people that really takes my time, and I want to give people time. This isn't a rush job. I believe in quality, and really just try to be thorough. So I reached out to you, Andrea, I think the winter of 2019, asked me if you would join me on this journey as project coordinator, because it is in a way like herding cats. And I really appreciated your help on this. It wouldn't have happened without your organization skills and your copy editing skills. I also want to give a shout out to Finn Gardner, who created the plain language summaries that are with each essay. I also want to give a shout out to Alejandra Ospina, who recorded each essay as well. So for people who haven't seen the essays yet, when you click on each essay, you'll see a link to a plain language summary, the audio on top, and then the actual text of the original essay. So I want it to be as complete. It's not perfect. It's not, this is just my attempt to be as accessible as possible. And yeah, it's out there in the world. It makes me happy.
That's great. That's so awesome. And so I would love to get into the conversation with our folks that are participating today as part of our conversation. So we'll just go, maybe I'll go in backwards order from what we did earlier. And Leah, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, recognizing that today marks the official anniversary, 30th anniversary of the ADA, can you describe what the ADA means to you?
Sure. To me, the ADA, number one, is the reason that I have and have been able to have a full-time job. Being able to get the accommodations that I need legally is the reason I'm able to keep working. Beyond that, to me, the ADA is a good starting point, but it's really remained a good starting point. A lot of people, mostly non-disabled people, point to the ADA as a sort of catch-all for combating everyday ableism and inaccessibility. And when I talk about my experiences with things I've seen or things that have happened to me that have been inaccessible, people will say, but that's illegal. And it's not that simple. The ADA has loopholes. It's really not perfect. And those loopholes have been known, they've been talked about, and they really haven't been addressed. They haven't been addressed to the extent that we need them to be. So an example would be, if you're in a building with a bank of elevators, under the ADA, it's possible that only one elevator meets current standards for accessibility. And it's also possible that no elevators would meet those standards because the law states that businesses in older buildings don't need to comply where it is, quote, technically infeasible to do so. And because technically infeasible isn't legally defined, it's really easy for building owners to claim that it would essentially be too hard to be compliant and they're still not breaking the law. So while the ADA has done a lot for us, I think a lot of people who aren't affected by it think that it's done a lot more than it has.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Valerie.
Yeah, this is Valerie. I think I have a very similar experience as Leah. I think in a very real way, because when I first found the disability community, I was working at a student disability services office on a college campus. And then later on, got an internship with an ADA coordinator. So I think like in a very real, tangible way, I'm not entirely sure that I would have found community, let alone started working in this world if the ADA wasn't around. But when we talk about kind of the more spirit of the ADA idea, I feel very disconnected to it often, and I think it's because there are many, many ways that it becomes very evident that in a lot of ways the ADA was not written for disabled people that look like me or disabled people whose minds and bodies function like mine do. And so, like Leah said, I think it is very much an extremely important and necessary beginning step. But I often think we, especially people that are not disabled, look at it as the sort of end-all, be-all. Okay, we have our disability anti-discrimination bill, therefore we've got our bases covered. When really it was more, to me, it feels more like a foot in the door to start having an honest conversation than it was, or that it has been the end of that conversation. And I think that's why it's important to have panels like we're having now so that we can have honest and real conversations about how we get better and move beyond what the ADA has afforded us.
Thank you so much. And Rima?
Yes, this is Rima. So, in the capacity of physical and the physical and infrastructure, so ramps, regulations, that kind of thing, the ADA has been amazing. But there's also the emotional, the spiritual, and other ephemeral elements that the ADA does not address, particularly for those of us that are racially marginalized. I personally liken the ADA, the passing of the ADA with the passing of the 19th Amendment, which is the women's right to vote. So I believe it's August 14th, 1920. It's when the 19th Amendment was ratified. And quote unquote, quotes hand signals right now, quote unquote, all women were granted the right to vote thanks to the 19th Amendment. And of course, history shows us that the definition of all was a little bit limited back in the day, much more so than would racially marginalized women to participate in the political process. The ADA is very much like that in my respect. Because, yeah, it was a win for quote unquote disabled people, but we need to unpack our understanding of the population disabled people. Who is that? In many respects, white people are the default setting for disabled people, just like white women are the default setting for women still. And so if that's the case, then if we think about the ADA and the work that went into it and the people that we saw on that sunny day in DC when the white men came together to sign the thing, it was very white centric. Where was everybody else, right? And 30 years later, the question still begs because, the ADA has not addressed the preschool to prison pipeline for Black and brown children, especially Black and brown men and boys. The ADA is not intersectional, and therein lies the crux of the issue. Because the ADA, if we're going to call it the cornerstone of disability culture, and this thing was not necessarily written with us in mind, and by us I mean BIPOC, racially marginalized people, that has meant that for the past 30 years, those of us who are racially marginalized and identify with the community in whatever capacity have been told either directly or it's been inferred to us very strongly that we need to check our race at the door. We need to check our marginalizations that do not include disability or our status as a woman at the door in order to be considered acceptable in the disability community. And that's really unacceptable. And it's the backbone of the essay that I wrote for this project. You know, the ramifications for racially marginalized people that have the gall to enter into disability spaces as unapologetically brown and Black folks. You know, the ramifications are glaring, and for many of us have been insurmountable. How many Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have walked away from the disability community because they have been told, you are not welcome here. Your Blackness is unacceptable. If you can't behave and focus on your disability in our spaces, you got to go. You know, that has been the reality for the past 30 years. And so today has been very bittersweet for me because I definitely am a person that has experienced a lot of very public racism, especially in the past year. And so I see my peers and my compadres excited about the 30th anniversary. And I've been sitting in my house thinking, you know what? I'm feeling kind of ambivalent today, you know? We got scores of racially marginalized people that are tied up in the prison system, are chronically homeless. And, you know, a lot of them don't realize that today is a momentous day for their community, and for good reason. You know, what has the ADA done for them? My big question, and the reason why I continue to do what I do is, you know, I think there's room for, I know there's room for improvement. There has to be room for improvement. We do need to do better, and we will. And you know, I feel grateful to be able to engage in these kinds of conversations. It's a privilege to be in these kinds of spaces and have this kind of dialogue, because this is what's going to ensure that the next 30 years are what we racially marginalized people need for it to be, which will not only benefit us, but will benefit the disability community and will benefit the entire country as we know it.
Oh, fire, the cake from that. Thank you so much, Rima. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that this conversation today is poised kind of at, not necessarily the end, but it's certainly on this particular day, and also kind of at the end of what many deem ADA week. I think it's so important to bring these pieces to light. So thank you so much. I could say a lot more, but I won't. TJ, would love to hear from you. What does the ADA mean to you?
That is a good question, a very good question. Mainly because a lot of layers to unpack, and unfortunately, due to time, I can't get into the whole thing, but I'll get into two important viewpoints. From a personal level, ADA is a godsend. It is a lifesaver. I don't know what my life would have looked like if I didn't have access to accommodations for all the jobs that I worked in the past, and also all the schools that I attended. I don't know if I will be here talking to you all right now without the ADA. That's how important ADA is personally. It pretty much enabled me to become an independent person. No, let me rephrase. Interdependent person. Yes, I do some things on my own, but I still need assistance and help. That's where the ADA comes in. It provides help and resources. However, I do agree that ADA failed communities of color because ADA is mainly focusing on the white disabled community. I perfectly agree. However, we also got to take into consideration how communities of color fail to uphold the ADA as well and integrate ADA into their cultures. For example, ADA, no, not ADA. For instance, communities of color have failed disabled people in integrating us into the community. It's not just putting ramps up or putting sensory rooms where people could get away from the noise, but also just including us in day-to-day activities. The let's take Chicago for example, and I wanted to enjoy anime and cartoons, right? I can't really go to a place on the south side of Chicago too, because it's it doesn't have that many places for people to enjoy nerdy stuff. I gotta go to the north side or the suburbs to get those things. And on top of that, some of those places in those areas even may not be accessible physically, or it may not be accessible because of the racist environment. It does not welcome disabled people of color. It may not welcome people of color in general, or even disabled people in general in that setting. So I think while the ADA has been helpful for disabled people of color, I would love to see more Black and Brown and marginalized communities make the ADA a part of the culture, make it to where disability is not only accepted but must be accommodated in all walks of life, from the grocery store to schools to fun places, to all aspects of life.
That's so good, and I love hearing that that personal perspective. That's so great. Thank you, TJ. And let's see. I think we have Jen. Would love to hear your perspective.
So my piece does kind of talk quite a bit about this question and addressing what the ADA means to me. And I feel like with most things, it's complex. I think about it as a Native person who is a citizen of a sovereign nation. The United States laws should not be applied on tribal land and within tribal nations. However, the United States government has a trust and treaty responsibility to us to provide us with things like healthcare and infrastructure. And they've never followed through on these things. They've broken every treaty there is. And so we have a lot of issues with inaccessibility on our tribal lands. But a big part of that is due to poverty. How do you offer something like paratransit transportation on, we'll say, the Navajo Nation? Their reservation spans 3 states. It's the size of West Virginia, but they don't have proper roads throughout the reservation. How do you worry about whether or not your building has, is compliant to different disability access needs when your people don't even have clean running water? You know, like there's so many other basic needs that Native people are still trying to meet. And I don't say that to undermine disability needs, because those are basic needs that must be met as well. But it feels like as Native people, we're always, you know, so many steps behind the rest of the United States. And a lot of that is because of over 500 years of genocide. It's the things that we've been through and the things we're still going through. You know, if you look at COVID-19, for example, we've had the highest infection rates per capita in this country. I know at one point, Navajo Nation's death rate was actually higher than 13 states' death rates combined. You know, and a part of that is because our healthcare system has not been properly funded. Our tribes are not properly funded. We have such high rates of houselessness, you know, food insecurity, starvation. We have a lot of underlying health issues as well, like diabetes and hypertension, asthma, you know, and a lot of those things are a result of having our traditional foods taken from us, from not being on our ancestral lands, from having our lands and our water and our air and our bodies polluted by pipelines and mines and large-scale agricultural businesses and logging. And, you know, when I look at the ADA, that doesn't address any of those issues, you know? It doesn't address the issues that have created such high rates of disability and chronic illness within Native community. And frankly, I don't really feel like a lot of the disability community has ever even thought about Native people, let alone questioned if they should show up for us. And I don't want to say that to undermine all the amazing disability justice accomplices that we Natives have, because we absolutely do have them in this community. But like so many other people here have said, the disability movement has been largely white, at least in what we see in the people who are making those decisions. And that's really frustrating, and it can make it difficult, at least for me at times, to feel like I have a place in this movement. You know, I know that I do, but I don't know that everybody else knows that I do. You know, about a year ago or so, I was trying to get involved with the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia Metro chapter of ADAPT. And I was speaking to one of their members who is white, and I asked them if their chapter had ever done anything to address the DC football team mascot. And they said, well, that's not really a disability issue. And I then had to explain, well, actually studies are finding that Native youth who go to schools that have mascots, they have lower rates of self-esteem. They have higher rates of depression, suicidal ideation. I was like, I can just say for myself, there are days when I don't go out in this city because I know I cannot mentally and emotionally handle seeing that imagery. And that's meant that I've missed doctor's appointments. It's meant that I didn't get groceries when I needed them. You know, so I think there's just so much there that a lot of the white folks in the disability movement and community just, they need to learn, and they need to think bigger and broader. And I also say that some non-Native BIPOC folks as well need to do that. You know, unfortunately, we BIPOC folks do a lot of harm to one another at times. You know, maybe we didn't create these systems of oppression, but that doesn't mean that we don't sometimes play a role in them. This week, for example, there was an ADA30 event that had Senator Elizabeth Warren on it. You know, I was really upset when I saw that. You know, Senator Warren has done a lot of harm to Native people, particularly to Cherokee women such as myself. You know, she's not an advocate for, you know, disabled and ill Native people. You know, her family's literally taken part in killing us and stealing our land. So, you know, I feel like we absolutely have to have spaces like this. You know, we have to have that. You know, we have to have events around decolonization. Like, we have to have these things. because we can't separate out our racial or ethnic identity and the oppression we suffer from that from being disabled, or from the oppression we suffer from our gender or sexuality and so forth. Like, all of these things are combined. They're not, you know, solo issues, just siloed off on their own. So long story short, I'm glad the ADA exists. And I don't want to say I haven't benefited from it, but by no means is it this amazing piece of legislation that's brought, you know, freedom and revolution and prosperity and such, you know, to disabled and ill natives. You know, it just hasn't done enough for us.
Woo, the truth today that is being spoken. Thank you, Jen. And so now, for the sake of time, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask some specific questions to specific people and hear a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper into the conversation. Thank you all so much for those perspectives. So my first question is both for Valerie and TJ, and we'll start with Valerie. What do you consider to be the most pressing needs facing disabled people today, especially disabled people of color? And I know a lot of this was alluded to, or even not necessarily alluded to, but spoken about in the conversation we just had, but would love for you to kind of expand on those. You are on mute, Valerie. There you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Nope, actually we lost you again, sorry. You know what?
Hello?
Yes,
Got it? Okay.
yes.
And different people, different communities have different needs as well. So I think there's many different things, but I kind of want to go back to what Jen mentioned, because it's a lot of what I think about is that for so many communities of color, there are still very real barriers to just getting even to grab hold of some of the rights that the ADA has. And so I think for a lot of communities of color, if we're going to talk disability specific, just being seen so that we can have these advocacy questions fully as, you know, Black disabled person, as an Indigenous North American person with a disability, right? Because we can't even talk about the greatest needs that our communities have if we're not there to have the conversation, if other people are having the conversation for us. At the same time, you know, right now we're in, one of the things that has been particularly frustrating about being disabled in 2020 is that right now, as a Black woman watching the George Floyd uprisings happen, and this being the conversation of police brutality being something that I am watching every day and seeing kind of come into a collective consciousness in a way that hadn't, but in a way that I've always existed in as a Black woman. And then getting on a space like Twitter, where I have a timeline full of disabled people who in a private conversation would consider themselves allies, and everything that is a conversation, everything that energy and focus and priority is on has nothing to do with Black disabled people being killed by cops, right? That I can sit there and I can cry and be frustrated reading the news and then think that maybe I'd be able to go to a community for, for solace, and they'd rather talk about the fact that the headline used person first instead of identity first language, right? I think sometimes one of our biggest needs, at least from the community, is an adjustment of priorities. Part of what we see, and I think part of the reason, so I don't want to speak for the other panelists, but I think part of the reason, at least I feel so disconnected from the ADA, and oftentimes so to that point, like I think Ray mentioned, of just wanting to walk away and not do this work anymore, is that I'm consistently reminded that I am not a priority in the disability community, and that my needs and the needs of my community are not a priority. Or that if entire needs can be thrown away, or entire analysis and points can be thrown away because the right language wasn't used, or the terms that people respond well to aren't used, or some other way to kind of throw it out. And I don't want to minimize the very real, daily needs that people have just across the spectrum, but also continuing to elevate some of these things. Access to a building is really important, and I'm so glad that we have that. But like Jen mentioned, if you don't have running water, you're never even going to get to that building in the first place. And so I think sometimes there's an adjustment that needs to be made on our focus and our priority, and I think it's okay, and it needs to be fostered more for us to be able to shift our focus to things that maybe don't feel in the moment like they're disability issues, but our disabled peers and friends are telling us, hey, this is an issue that's really affecting our community and we need your solidarity right now. And being able to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put this one thing that I'm focusing on to the side, and I'm going to link arms with the community that needs it for what they need, and kind of take it on faith. And so I think I want to answer it like that, rather than saying, well, if we fix X, Y, Z, that'll make things great for Latino people with disabilities, because I think that's a little bit too simplistic for the flexibility that we need to adjust as it's needed and make sure that we are prioritizing that highest need when it's needed.
Thank you, TJ.
I think, see, this is where I might get bananas and apples thrown at me. But as much as we focus a lot on how the ADA should apply to work and getting into essential services like grocery stores or doctor's appointments and schools, etc., what good is it if we don't talk about applying ADA to fun stuff? We all want to have fun now. We want to, go to our favorite restaurants. We want to kick it at a club. We want to just get away from life. But I think we so heavily focus on work and education that we push the fun stuff to the side. And in fact, even in a broader perspective, we assume that disabled people are not able to have fun. They're not able to go out or participate in sports and other things. And this especially hits home for college students or even high school students who want to participate in sports or in other clubs, but because of their disability, they are discouraged in joining, or if they do join, they only get the brief appearance, but they don't immediately participate in the experience. With that being said, I think the hurdle that ADA should tackle, or a similar bill should tackle, is how to make sure that disabled people, especially in college and even in high school, just young disabled folks, especially young disabled folks of color, can have access to fun stuff.
Thank you. That's so good. And again, I'm trying not to comment too much, so I'm just gonna say thanks. Thank you so much. So Leah, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, this part of the conversation at least. And if the ADA were created today, what would it look like and what would it cover? I think TJ gave a great entree into that. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd like to think that if the ADA were created in 2020, it would be better for us. It would be more robust, more enforced. It's really just not well enforced at all right now. But honestly, I don't know that it would. Of all marginalized communities, disabled folks are really the most forgotten. We really still have to do the work ourselves. I love examples. So we all learned years ago that women make a median salary of, I think it's around 81 cents to a man's dollar. But many people still share that without knowing that that's heavily weighted towards data from white women. Like Rema pointed out earlier, this year people are out there celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, but that's white women. 100 years ago, most people on this panel couldn't vote. Even 60 years ago, most people on this panel couldn't vote. If we break down the data from the dollars data further, you can see that Hispanic and Latina women make even less than white women. Black and Indigenous women make even less on average. And I know a lot of people who are aware of those discrepancies on top of the 81-cent data point, but I haven't met a single person who isn't disabled or intimately connected to someone who's disabled or related to someone who's disabled who's aware that disabled people can legally be paid less than minimum wage. Of course, the numbers continue to trend down the more kind of intersectionality there is. A white disabled person is likely to earn slightly more than their Black or Indigenous counterparts. People don't really seem to talk about it unless they're directly affected. So if the ADA was created today, again, disabled people would still have to do the bulk of the work. You look at the work that went into the ADA 30 years ago, people weren't really advocating for us. We were doing it ourselves. On the other hand, to be a little bit more positive, systems like Twitter are giving us more access to our representatives, where it's easier to be heard without a physical presence, and more access to each other and to build more of that community and talk to each other and share ideas. Now, while disabled people obviously had a hand in crafting the original ADA 30 years ago, I'd like to think today's ADA would be a lot more intersectional. It would have a lot more of an emphasis on mental health along with physical health. It wouldn't be so centered around a white narrative, as TJ pointed out. There's a lot in there where white is the default. And I'd like to think that if it were created today, that wouldn't be the case.
Thank you so much. And Valerie, do you have anything you'd like to add to that particular commentary? So once again, we're on mute.
Can you hear me? I don't know why that's happening.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, can you re-ask the question? I was answering one of the questions and comments.
Right, so basically if the ADA were created like right now, 2020,
yes.
What would it look like and what would it cover?
Yeah, so I think, like Leah said, I think that it would definitely be more intersectional. I think there's actually a lot, so I think there's kind of two parts to this. So not only do we have the ADA itself that I think tries to be very broad because of the definition, and then we have the amendments to kind of support that definition, and the way that the titles are set out. But then we also, on the other side, we have the actual guidelines. And I don't know how many people have looked into some of the background on the creation of those, but somebody had asked in the comments, and I figured I can roll this, kind of try to adjust that question while answering this question about why we wouldn't just focus on the disability, why we would focus on some of these other identity factors. And so, for example, when we talk about how the access guidelines that we create accessible buildings for, that was made largely by a small group of white male wheelchair users. Now, when we talk about how broad the definition is of disability in the ADA and then build access guidelines on a handful of white, average height, manual wheelchair users, that I think is a really good example that can kind of show you how much could be missed when you're talking about building an access guideline, because that's an extremely small population of people who are disabled. When we talk about, Leah was talking about, for example, the wage difference. So we know that disabled people can be paid sub-minimum wage, but even when we talk about minimum wage, we recognize that there's a difference from what people of color make to what white people make. And so when we talk about what the ADA would look like now, and if we wanted an ADA that worked for everybody, you cannot do that without acknowledging that that non-white disabled people are going to experience their disability differently than white disabled people. You also can't ignore any of these other identity markers, because those will directly affect how people are able to grab hold of and use the ADA. And so when I think, as somebody who is chronically ill and mentally ill, and also a Black woman, the one thing that kind of always jumps in my mind when I think about if the ADA was written now is to have the understanding of the way that access needs, whether it's in school, whether it's in work, places of public accommodation, are different for somebody whose disability is extremely variable. Also for somebody who, I think just neurodivergence in general is largely extremely missed in the ADA. I think TJ kind of talked about this. There's not a whole lot in there. I should say we're able, the way it's written is flexible enough to apply things that aren't directly in there. But there's a lot, I think, that could be done for people with mental illness that is missed in the ADA. People don't think about the fact that even something like the home internet wasn't really a thing when the ADA was written. That's why we're going through all these lawsuits and court cases now about access requirements for the web. Technology in the last 30 years has just, I mean, we have computers in our pockets, right? And so I think there's also just very real technological changes, building changes that we have now that we're now kind of trying to look back and figure out how we can apply the ADA to that. What are the new access requirements? I know when I was doing, I'm access certified to do building plans examinations. And one of the things that we ran into a lot was because of the limited amount of services or the limited amount of people that were used to create the access requirements, people who use scooters and people who are larger in size are almost on a very regular occurrence. ADA is not accessible to them at all, simply because they're larger than maybe what we consider like the body average, right? So as somebody who used to be fat, it wasn't really accessible sometimes for me to even sit in an accessible bench at a doctor's office, right? Because of what we determined those requirements off of. So I think there's a huge, there's a lot of things as far as intersectionality that we didn't look at, whether it's because of who we focused on in that conversation or because those things simply didn't exist yet, and it was really hard to imagine that those things would be around someday. That would drastically change what the ADA looked like if it was done today.
Thank you, Valerie. So now, Jen, I'd like to direct a question for you. So the fact that the series highlights the experiences of disabled BIPOC implies that our views and experiences generally aren't the same as those of white disabled folks. And it's been said in so many ways already, but I would like to hear more about some of examples from your lived experiences. You've shared some, but would love to delve a little bit deeper into those.
Sure. So this is Jen. Um, it's a tough question because I feel like I have so many things that I could say. So I guess I'll just start with, one, there's that trust and treaty right to healthcare and certain services that I have as a Native person that goes largely unmet in this country. But I'll focus a little bit more just on me personally and some of the things I have experienced that make my situation as a disabled and ill Native person different than that of a white person. I'm not believed as often in medical settings. I understand that I'm a white coded Native, but my last name is Deerenwater. The way that I'm treated by medical professionals changes very quickly when they realize my last name. I've had people assume that I'm just lying about my health issues, that I'm just a drug seeker, that I'm just, a crazy Indian and I just need to be locked away somewhere. And these are things that white, ill, and disabled folks aren't going to have to deal with. And it's definitely had an impact on my health and my quality of healthcare. I've stopped seeking out mental health care because frankly, it feels like a threat to my life. I don't feel like I can talk openly with mental health care providers about, depression or my complex PTSD without the fear of them threatening to call 911 on me or to commit me. That's terrifying. The last time that happened, I thought I was going to have to leave my house and go hide out somewhere for a while. Native women have been murdered by the police multiple occasions on mental health wellness checks. Having a doctor say they want to call 911 and have cops in to help me, that's the antithesis of helping me as a Native disabled person. It's also just some of the other things that get said. When you're Native, you're treated like you're this racial unicorn. People are just fascinated by us because they never really thought that we were real people and we exist. And unfortunately, I get a lot of that in the healthcare setting. People saying to me, oh, tell me about your people, trying to grab my medicine pouch, asking me, oh, is your husband an Indian? There's just been so many really messed up things said to me, and they've been said at times where my feet have been in stirrups. When I was getting an IUD replaced. It's when I've been at the ER after my partner at the time abused me and I was trying to get help at the ER. It's been after I've had major procedures and I can't move because I'm in too much pain from those procedures. It's like these things that they will say to me is just ludicrous and awful on its own, but then to have it in those kind of moments, it makes me feel like my life doesn't have value. And there are times where I've canceled medical appointments because I just couldn't face that nonsense on a particular day. There's also issues of, institutional oppression that, disabled and ill Native folks face. There's the fact that we're still suffering from over 500 years of genocide. Our lands have been illegally occupied for over 500 years. There have been a lot of horrible things done to us in that time, a lot of horrible things that are still being done to us. Just today alone, there's a Native man in Rapid City, South Dakota, who the police sicked one of their canine unit dogs on him. The press release I came across said that the dog was attacking him for like 2 minutes. You know, it just, that, you know, these sorts of things create disabilities and illnesses, and they make existing disabilities and illnesses worse. You know, they put our lives at risk. You know, the very government, the very state that white folks will tell me to go to help me is the same entity that's trying to kill me. You know, the Seattle Indian Health Board, back in May, they came out and said that they had made a request to the government for COVID-19 testing supplies and personal protective equipment, and instead they were sent body bags and toe tags. This is the world that I have to exist in. You know, the days of the only good Indian being a dead Indian have not ended for us. So that's going to have a drastic impact on my life in a way that white folks aren't going to experience. You know, there's also issues of other forms of violence, like Native community. We have staggeringly high rates of sexual assault and domestic violence, trafficking, our women, two-spirits, and children going murdered and missing. And when you look at that and you think of that and combine that with the fact that disabled women have really high rates of domestic violence and sexual assault, it's like, well, dear God, disabled Native women really never stand a chance in not suffering that fate, you know? I think about, you know, I've done a lot of reproductive justice work over the years, and I think about how, you know, disabled people are sterilized against our will, how Native people are sterilized against our will, as well as Black and brown folks. And it's being done by the government. You know, the pollution of our lands. You know, pollution creates health problems. It exacerbates health problems. So does poverty. You know, just the experience that I'm going to have as a Native person is going to be vastly different than as a white person. And that is still very much true within, you know, disability and health issues.
Thank you. Just thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. For the final kind of prepared question, I'm gonna direct this to Rima. Rima, the late Stacy Park Milburn, a dear friend and sister of mine, was very committed to the idea of not historicizing the work of the movement, specifically around ADA, but instead celebrating it while looking ahead. What is, or let's say, what should the future of disability rights and justice look like? And what is the future and what does it look like? In your dream
Great
world.
question. If I were queen, oh, and this is Rima. I am not queen, unfortunately. What are you gonna do? Yeah, you know, I am fully on board with not fixating on history, except with regards to the following. We need to address and honor and acknowledge the people that history kind of forgot, particularly racially marginalized folks that have done a lot of the heavy lifting and carrying of the water with regards to the disability rights movement, independent living movement, and the work that brought the ADA into reality. They're you know, our literal and figurative ancestors that toiled without recognition largely deserve their due. And this is, for me personally, as we're looking forward, that is incredibly important, and that is a huge priority for me. Looking forward, but honoring my ancestors, so to speak. And you know, as bittersweet as it is, Stacy has become one of those ancestors as well. with regards to looking forward, I think that for me personally, a huge part of that is critically assessing what the first 30 years have looked like. So there's no nostalgia for me by any stretch of the imagination. And I know that in order for the next 30 years and beyond to be what we need it to be, there does need to be a lot of critiquing and confronting and facing what did not go so well in the past 30 years, what got left behind in the past 30 years. And, that I personally am excited to do that work. I know that a lot of my peers in the disability community are not so excited about that. I look at what's happened in disability spaces for the past 7 weeks or so. Before Memorial Day of this year, I can't think of a single national disability organization or a state or local level Center for Independent Living or statewide Independent Living Council, for instance, that issued a solidarity statement that invoked the name Black Lives Matter. And post Memorial Day of this year, I have a hard time finding such an organization that hasn't issued a statement. And so that has occurred at the same time as the 30th anniversary of the ADA. And so I urge my peers in disability spaces to take their solidarity statements. Some of them are very lofty and some of them are quite confessional, and acknowledge the gaps that have occurred, the gaps that they may have actively participated in. Take those solidarity statements, look at the ADA, look at disability culture past 30 years, and use those solidarity statements or great intentions, whatever, to propel themselves forward. We're at this point as a culture that is, well, as far as I know, is pretty unprecedented. We are finally having the conversations that a lot of us have gotten into a lot of trouble for having for the past few generations. And for me personally, it's been very jarring the past 7 weeks. Hearing people who are recognized leaders in the disability community say things like Black Lives Matter, these same people that a year ago were working pretty hard to get me sidelined. It's like, wait, what happened? There are some steps that were missed along the way, which brings me to my other point, the steps that were missed. We need to acknowledge the harm that has been enacted on particularly racially marginalized people who have tried to make space for ourselves in this community and in this movement, and have been punished because of that. Because a lot of the people that did the punishing back in the day, ever since Memorial Day of this year, have tried to sort of recast themselves as being intersectional and inclusive. But a lot of us are sitting back and wondering, well, wait a second, I haven't gotten an apology from you, and I don't think that I've seen any kind of acknowledgement of the harm that you've done. I think that the next 30 years will be more intersectional. We will hear more from racially marginalized people, and I know that scares a lot of folks. And I recognize that for many people, it feels like there's a loss of footing that's happening. And so for quite a few of those folks, they're trying to compensate and sort of recreate themselves as being, I've always been for Black lives, that kind of thing. That's not it. That's not that's not your ticket into the second 30 years of the ADA. I think it's time for some real honest conversation now between racially marginalized marginalized disabled people, and white people, particularly white people who have had the lion's share of power and authority in this community. As the Bible says, and the last shall become first. You know, the expertise and the guidance and just the everything about us that we have infused this movement with finally needs to be acknowledged and due given. So for me, yeah, looking forward is huge, but also, you know, rectifying the historical wrongs that have occurred with regards to racially marginalized people, that has to be a part of looking forward. Because if that isn't a part of it, the looking forward is going to be very superficial, and you know, our children's generation is going to have the conversations that we're having now. Let's just have the conversations now and be done with it, and then truly move forward.
Thank you. I'm like doing my best based on time, not to say too much, but thank you so much, Rima. And so we've got just a few minutes left. I know that part of the our conversation today, we have 10 people that are going to be winners of Alice's the book that just recently released, compilation from Alice. And so Emily, can you share the 10 winners with us?
Yes, I can. So it is my pleasure to announce the 10 winners who've been chosen randomly from the participation list today. You will need to email me, Emily Beitix. I'm the Associate Director at the Longmore Institute. And my email is beitix, BEITIKS, @sfsu.edu. And you need to let me know if you want the ebook, the audiobook, or a hard copy, and we'll get that out to you. Our winners are, I'm not going to spell out all these names because a lot of folks are looking, but you can also use that email if you're worried your name was mentioned. Zachary Tumlin, Sarah Hasmer, Mira Salas, Lily Diego Johnson, Cade Sharp, Janet Sherwood, Eleanor Cullen, Kamisha Jones, Anais Sensiba, and Alexis Kosick. And many apologies if I butchered your name. Congratulations.
Congratulations to those 10 folks. And so we just have a few minutes. We aren't going to really get to the Q&A box, but you know, this has been an amazing opportunity to hear perspectives, hear your stories, and obviously the essays go deeper into that. And a lot of folks in the chat were just asking about, you know, thinking forward, positive examples. And what I would love to hear from each of you, we've got 4 minutes. So if you have a 30-minute style elevator speech of what is the call to action from here? So would love to hear, again, what is the call to action based on your experience and just thinking forward? So let's start with Leah.
The call to action, I'd say, varies, depends on who you are. If you are non-disabled, keep talking about it. Thank you for joining today and being here, even though you're not in this community. It's a start, and don't kind of let this go just because the anniversary is over after today. Keep talking about it. Do your research, do some reading, read all the essays by everyone on this panel and the others who contributed to the ADA30InColor. Tell people, talk about it. Accessibility is not just an issue for people with disabilities. disabled people are probably the biggest minority. It's not even really fair to call us a minority because a huge number of Americans have a disability of some kind, probably more than one. So my call to action would say, just keep talking about it, keep learning, do your research, keep reading. If you are disabled and white, same thing. Make sure that you are amplifying the voices of people who don't look like you, because they're not going to be the same, even if you have the same disability. Like Jen said, we have very different experiences when we go to a doctor's appointment or see a medical professional. We get called different things. We get treated differently because we don't have the privilege of white skin. So keep that in mind and be aware. And if you are, like those of us on this panel, disabled and BIPOC, hang in there, I think is the call to action. Just know that we're all experiencing things differently, and I'd say stay vocal when you can.
Thank you. And now let's hear from Valerie. Quick 30-second call to action.
Yes, okay, and hopefully this addresses some of the questions that are in there as well. Since I only have 30 seconds, I think I would sum it down to say by the call to action at this point is to stop avoiding things just because they make you uncomfortable, regardless of what that conversation is. There's a lot of people that are commenting about different things, whether it's pushback, whether it's do I have the right to say this, when should I talk about this? If something makes you uncomfortable, it's because you have an opportunity to learn. Take that opportunity and move forward with that. We can no longer sidestep issues that we need to address within our community in order to move forward because we refuse to talk about things that make us squeamish or that we want to hide from. And so I think that is kind of the first step before we can really move forward, is that we need to stop avoiding the things that make us uncomfortable or that make us look bad or feel bad simply because they make us look or feel bad, because that's not going to solve anything, and it's not going to allow us to listen to the people that need to be listened to in order to make the changes that need to happen.
Thank you. Rima.
This is Rima, and I want to amplify what Valerie said. It's actually the subject matter of my essay, which is called Missing Step. One of the unfortunate components of the disability community as far as our culture is concerned is that there has been we have a history of stepping around the things that make us uncomfortable, particularly stepping around people who engage in behaviors that are abusive, that are harmful. We step around and we think if we just ignore that, it will go away. Or we think this is a leader in the community, and so we can't say anything. We just sort of have to step around this person because they were a founding member of the independent living movement or whatever. That is not healthy. That does not create healthy culture. This next 30 years of the ADA, we need to prioritize the health and sustainability of our culture. We need to stop stepping around the so-called social minefields. We need to fix the steps. We need to examine and get the tools together to fix the steps once and for all.
Ooh, such power. TJ, your 1 30-second action.
Hey, sure. Hi, this TJ speaking. No matter if you want to do this now or if you want to talk about it in ADA50 or ADA60, we must change the mindset from focusing on one identity only to realize that all identities affect each other when it comes to social issues. We cannot continue to separate disability from racism, sexism, and all other ills. And even if we focus on disability, we'll still be discriminated because of our skin color, because of what we look like, because of our gender, or because of who we choose to love, or because of how much money we have. Disability affects a lot of things, so we must focus on many things in order to make ADA a better law and stop separating one identity from the other. If that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jen.
Hi, this is Jen. So I would say that in everything that you're doing in movement work in particular, think about, how will this level of access impact other people? A great example is, all of the internet and distance learning and such. That's great. We should have those things. But if you don't have high-speed broadband or wireless phone service in where you live, then it doesn't really matter if you have a legal right to, distance learning or working from home. And the way that you're going to do that is by having BIPOC folks at the table and having us at the table from the very moment conversations begin, and having the appropriate people. Don't tokenize us. Any native will not do. You can't just go and like cherry pick which disabled native you want. You have to actually start working with us, get to know us, and really meaningfully include us in this work. And I mean, I think that goes for all of us who are marginalized within, Spoonie community. Don't tokenize us. We need meaningful inclusion.
Oh my goodness. All such great actions. And honestly, I know I was challenged myself. So grateful for each of you. It's been an honor to just get to know you through your work and through our conversations, both today and previously. If you haven't checked out the Disability Visibility Project website and seen the essays, please do. And follow the hashtag and all of those good things. Happy ADA 30 again to each of you. There's work to be done. See you next time.
Black and white text on a purple and gold background reads, "Thank you for watching. Please visit us at longmoreinstitute.sfsu.edu and on Twitter at longmoreinst, as well as Facebook at SFSU Disability."